Hey folks, my name is Jim Jividen. I am a course mentor with organizational behavior and leadership. My email address, should you desire to use it, is jim.jividen at wgu.edu. So what is this? This is the long form video for chapter 10 in your text. That's competency 3, teams and team building. It's understanding work teams. You have probably, if you have gotten here, at some point heard me say some variation of the following. The most important chapter in the course is chapter 10. The most important competency in the course is competency 3. The reason for that is a plurality of the questions on your exam come from this chapter. At the time of this recording, all of those things remain true. My expectation is that that's not going to change for the life of this course. That if you are hearing this this recording rather, and you are preparing for a multiple choice exam, you are preparing for a multiple choice exam where the most important chapter is this one. Consider actually working with this chapter in conjunction with chapter 9 from competency 2, as many of the concepts have a bit of a crossover, and you might be able to kind of generate a good level of understanding about the two pieces of the course were you to work on them together. So what is it that we will be looking at over the next, 45 minutes, let's say, in this long form video? Four things, really. We're going to contrast groups and teams. We're going to talk about the 4 types of work teams that exist in your text, discuss the characteristics of effective teams, and show how organizations can create team players. Look, Teams are a big deal. Within the last couple of decades, just with my own career trajectory here at WGU, I was hired in the late spring of 2012, and I was hired as an individual. The job announcement was for an individual course, and within a year after I had been here, I was part of a team as we moved to an entirely kind of team format at the university, a team structure within the organization, and that remains true. So just within my life here as a course mentor on this very course, we have moved to a team format. How does that impact you? I think it impacts you a lot if, as you sit here today, you are planning to take this degree and use it to get a better job in your career, as that's going to mean interviews. And I think it's super likely that you have some kind of interview question that looks to determine your level of experience, level of comfort in working in a team environment. So as you prepare for those interviews, you want to craft some kind of response that demonstrates your comfort, your experience in working with other people, and preferably one in the workplace as opposed to in your personal life, but one of each is valuable. And if you've played sports, for example, that's a useful to talking about your level of understanding of the complementary nature of a team, the interdependence of a team, and then preferably you also have some kind of workplace example. You want specific anecdotes at the ready to go into a job interview with. You don't just want general traits. You don't want to go into the job interview saying, well, of course I'm responsible. You want a story from your life that illustrates your responsibility. You want a story from your life that illustrates your dependability. Things like how well you work in a team, and then a related issue, how well you handle conflict. are really kind of standard interview questions. I have been asked them, and I have asked them. I think you want really pretty cleanly to go into a job interview situation with those anecdotes at the ready, and maybe ones that can be a little flexible. So if you're asked one question and have an answer prepared that can be tailored to a couple of different ways the interviewer can go, then you're ready with that answer. You want to have prepared it. You don't want to sound as if you've memorized it. You don't want to sound as if you're reading from a script. Ideally, your presentation style is extemporaneous. Ideally, it sounds as if these are the first times the words have come out of your mouth. But that doesn't mean you want them to be the first time the words have come out of your mouth. In fact, if you have the ability to go on a job interview for a job that maybe you don't care about so much, just to use that experience as practice, I think that's smart. That it's more than just sort of preparing in your kitchen, talking to your cat Smuckers. It's putting on hard clothes, driving to some office complex someplace, sitting in a lobby, shaking hands with someone, sitting at some kind of conference table, all of those kinds of things, or if you're doing it virtually, those kinds of things that change your adrenaline, that change your level of focus, that you're responding to questions that you're not anticipating. All of those things really, I think, are important. Real world, real live, not a drill, situations that in fact you use as a drill in order that you can tell your story, that you can communicate who you are. So with all of those things being said, Chapter 9, the one we're not doing right now, is about groups, and Chapter 10 is about teams. Hey, Jividen, what's the difference? And at 309 in your text is a discussion of the difference between groups and teams. Fundamentally, it's this. Teams are more ambitious than are groups. Teams you should think of as a collective, as a unit of organization that's specifically put together in order to create a whole that is bigger than the sum of its parts. The idea of a work group really is just it's an administrative convenience. Take a bunch of individuals, stack their efforts on top of each other so we can, record it in some way. But the idea of a team is we select people who have complementary skills. They fit together, so that there's something bigger than just them that winds up coming out of the experience. If you were, here comes sports metaphor number one, if you were building a basketball team, you wouldn't just, have 7 power forwards. Even if they were the 7 best players you saw, you wouldn't have 7 power forwards. You'd need a point guard. You need a couple of wing players. You need someone in the pivot. You need shooters and ball handlers and all of the things that you'd want the pieces of which to fit together in a way that will create something bigger than just a collection of individual talents. A team more ambitious than a group, complementary players to create synergy, a whole being greater than the sum of its parts. There are 4 types of teams discussed in your book from 310 to 312. I think you want to be aware of all 4 of them. The first is a problem-solving team. The idea here is that the organization has some issues that it needs to deal with, throws a team at it, and the team cannot unilaterally enact their own recommendations. So if on your exam you get some type of scenario in which the team comes up with ideas as to how to attack certain problems, but then has to run it to management, that's your indicator that it's a problem-solving team. I talk about this kind of thing in the quiz video and in the live session. The exam to me isn't about Quizlet. It's not about flashcards. It's not about sitting down with a big notebook and memorizing a bunch of definitions. I think the exam is really more about test taking. And I talk about that in the quiz videos, but here's a good example. Self-managed work team. is a good example of a piece of jargon that even if you're not memorizing it, that if you see it on the exam, I think you can kind of think your way through to what that term might mean. If you've never seen this term before, never read page 310, you have no idea what this, you have no retention about what this means. If I say to you, hey, so what's a self-managed work team? You wouldn't just say, yeah, I don't know. You'd say, well, it's a team that manages itself, or some variation thereof, and that essentially is what it does. A self-managed work team has taken on a good number of the functions that we would associate with management, like planning work, like scheduling work, like assigning tasks, like making decisions, like working with suppliers and doing evaluation, and those kinds of things. So if you get a question where there's a team that is carrying on those kinds of functions, your thought should be, well, those are managerial type functions. That's a self-managed work team. Two more. On the left. Okay, so here's where I have to remind myself mainly that some of you aren't watching this video. Some of you are just listening to the audio. My apologies for those circumstances where I act as if everyone can see the things that I see. That's a mistake, and it's not one that I intend to make, but it is how it goes sometimes. Feel free, those of you who are over 21 and aren't driving, to take a shot every time Jividen either makes too many sports metaphors for your liking, or talks about 80s popular culture excessively, or says something like, well, we all understand that on the screen right now is when you're listening to the audio version. A cross-functional team is a team where the members are of the same hierarchical level but come from different departments. So, if you've got a scenario where, hey, there's a manager from sales and a manager from R&D and a manager from shipping and a manager from accounts, and they all get together to form one team, cross-functional work team. They're crossing functions, right? Different departments, and they're at the same hierarchical level. All of you know what a virtual team is, because you attend WGU, the finest virtual university in all the land, which means virtual team members don't work in the same physical space, so they communicate through email and phone. There's, I think, a quiz question where I talk about some of the obstacles that virtual teams face, or inherent in the question is some of the obstacles that virtual teams face. If you're not in the same physical space, the challenge is feeling like you're a team at all, because you're prone to independence. I mean, look. Academics, and I'm sort of an academic, are prone to feeling a little lone wolfy. I am not. One of the reasons why a person chooses a profession where they can spend a lot of time in libraries is they don't necessarily play well with others. If you have had experience in traditional, higher education and have walked through wherever the offices of your professors are, there are probably more books than pictures of family members. I don't know. I can't say for sure that membership in the professoriate has a lower degree of marriage and children than the general population, but I'm comfortable that it does. So, people who wind up in jobs like this tend to feel independent in nature anyway, and take the next step. This is not just an academic job. This is an academic job where I have chosen to work entirely by myself. There is no Rob Shaw is at the time of this recording a fellow course mentor on the course. I can't, lean over into the next office and say, Shaw, we're going to the basketball game on Friday, because he lives in Phoenix and I live in South Florida. So when you consider the the multiple strikes that are structurally embedded into people on a virtual team like mine feeling as if they are connected in some way. You can see that if you are managing a virtual team or an organization that puts together virtual teams, you've got to find ways to bring those kinds of people together to make them feel, a sense of camaraderie. It's tough. It's tricky, and I don't know that for me. I'm not sure what it is that WGU could do to specifically make me feel as if I'm first and foremost a member of a team. But whatever it is, it doesn't do it. And they try. But I'm a tough nut to crack, and I always feel a little bit prickly when I get a sense that I'm being overly managed, where I'm being kind of manipulated in specific team building ways. The hair on various parts of my body rises, and I don't know that the WGU fully appreciates sort of culturally their level of obstacle in getting people like me to feel as if we are fundamentally part of a team. So that's what organizations with virtual teams face is people like myself who just want to be left alone. There are, beginning at 313, this discussion of team effectiveness, and you're given these three broad factors that lead to creating effective teams. There are context factors, there are composition factors, there are process factors. I don't think you need to memorize them. There are a bunch of bullet points in Exhibit 10.3. I don't think it's going to do you any good to try to sit and memorize all of those factors. Just if you wanted some kind of categorization, a taxonomy in your head, that's really what we're discussing for the next several pages here in chapter 10. The first group of factors are context factors. What do we have? Resources, leadership, trust, performance evaluation. All concepts that you recognize, hey, if you want an effective team, you need a team with enough desks. If you want an effective team, you need a team that's managed well. If you want an effective team, you need a team where the members trust each other. That can be a hard deal. That can be a hard deal to, particularly in a virtual team. If I'm seeing someone every day, if I run into them, if we have lunch occasionally, if I know their families, then it's easier for me. It's easier for there to be some sort of reciprocal trust. Hey, I'm less likely to try to stick the knife into someone whose kids are in the offices, right? I know, fair question, Jividen. Why would you stick the knife into anybody? I get that. But look, sometimes in a workplace environment, there are occasions where it can feel like it's you or the other guy, and you don't want it to be the other guy if it could be you. And in a virtual team situation, building those kind of reciprocal bonds super tough. So how do you do that? How do you feel as if it's not sort of a dog eat dog? Challenging, right? And so you want that in every team. You want there to be good performance evaluation systems. So and that's a tricky thing in a team environment. Fair performance evaluations that both have some kind of capturing of your individual work and of your team success. I know absolutely. I've been in circumstances where I feel as if I have felt as if my particular contribution maybe does not get sufficiently recognized within the context of a musketeer grade, all for one, one for all, where everyone gets kind of the same idea. And I think, well, wait a minute, I carried a pretty good amount of the load here, but that is one of the things that leads to effective teams, where people feel as if, I am fairly respected, acknowledged, recognized, evaluated, both for my individual work and for the success, overall of the team. Composition factors mean what kind of people. What kind of people do you want that make to make an effective team? We have this discussion of the abilities of members. It won't surprise you that the teams of high abilities do better than teams of low abilities in circumstances where there's a task that requires a lot of thought. Less intelligent leadership can neutralize the effect of a high ability team. This again is another sports reference. So there's a good body of statistical knowledge say that coaches don't matter very much. I'm an adherent to that thought. That of the more overrated elements of sports analysis is, boy, that coach sure made good decisions. However, where coaches can have an impact is negatively. That it's less that a good manager or a good coach is going to drag a team to victory, but when you've got a pretty good team and a kind of crummy coach, that crummy coach can submarine that pretty good team. That crummy baseball manager can cost a pretty good team a couple of wins, and that really is what you see in the research more broadly about teams. That dumb leaders can hinder high ability teams. Personalities discussed at 316 and 317. Something to recognize is that teams that rate higher in the personality traits of conscientiousness and openness to experience tend to perform better than teams that don't. Those are two of the big five personality traits discussed in Chapter 5. And this is something else that I referenced probably in the quiz videos. Maybe you've heard those references. That if you see a concept that's in multiple chapters, particularly if those chapters are in multiple competencies, maybe put a mental asterisk by those concepts as if you're doing a little guesswork. Hey, I wonder what winds up on the exam. When I see something like on page 316, conscientiousness and openness to experience, and that's chapter 10, and I recognize, I've seen those two ideas before back in chapter 5, it strikes me those things might wind up on the examination. Discussion of roles at 317. The value of diversity of team members at 317 and 318. Diversity is particularly good, particularly valuable when you've got tasks that require a lot of different viewpoints. Hey, this is a job where you really want to look at the activity in multiple ways. It's not just my particular eyes that are useful in seeing how we want to do something. It's my eyes and your eyes and the eyes of the guy around the corner, because we all, come to a task with different experiences. So when you've got those kinds of jobs where, what would really be valuable is a different perspective. That's when diversity is super useful. Challenges, diversity slows you down, and for exactly the same reason that it's valuable, because all of those viewpoints, if they're going to be heard, takes more time than if we were just going to go with one viewpoint and just sort of hammer that nail. And if you've got a job that instead of valuing lots of different ways of looking at something, instead of that, really the job you have is one where you need to be very fast. You need to be very crisp, very efficient. Not a lot of time for a lot of chitter and chatter. I just gotta hammer this nail into this wall. then diversity can be challenging, because all of those voices, their views aren't really as useful as the speed it takes to move through a task. Generally speaking, you want teams that are smaller as opposed to larger. The larger a team gets, for the same reason the more diverse a team gets, the larger a team gets, the more you've got a lot of voices in the room. The harder it is to keep everything cohesive, the harder it is to keep everyone on the same page, the harder it is to avoid some members having their own agendas. The bigger, the more sprawling this team gets. The more the weight of it can cause, everything to collapse. It's one of the reasons for, say, the collapse of the Roman Empire. This got too big. They extended too far out. They conquered too much stuff. There was a disconnect between the needs of people living in Rome, the needs of the average Roman, and the far flung military needs, and the that require to contain cities that are way far away. If you could begin to wonder, why are we conquering something way over there? Why aren't we, here? What does that have to do with my life? And when those things happen, when you get that kind of a size, it can collapse under its own weight. Flexibility, member preferences, sort of finish out this discussion of composition factors. Process factors, process variables that deal with member commitment to a common purpose, like having a plan, having specific goals, believing in yourself. These kinds of procedural items that lead to effective teams. Teams that, for example, teams that consistently perform better establish a clear sense of what needs to be done and how. Successful teams really do a lot of talking. They really have a clear understanding of their mission. What is it that we are? What will it mean for us to succeed, both individually and collectively? Why are we together? How will we go about achieving the outcomes that we want? Those kinds of things, as opposed to just sort of wandering along in the wilderness, kind of flailing about. The more teams are really clear with each other about why they're there, and what it will mean for each of them to succeed, what that will look like, are more likely to reach that level of success. Efficacy is self-belief, and obviously, teams which have a higher level of self-belief, succeed more often than teams that don't. Teams whose goals are more specific, that are difficult but still achievable, are likely to succeed more often than teams whose goals are broader, more general, and are easier to maintain. Conflict, isn't necessarily bad. It's something we talk about in chapter 14. Some types of conflict are almost always bad. Personality conflict, relationship conflict. Bob doesn't like Tammy. Bob just doesn't like Tammy, no matter what Tammy does. That's almost always a bad thing. But creative tension, where there's disagreement about how to do something, about what the best way to do a job is, or about what the content of the job is. They can stimulate discussion. They can promote a critical assessment of new ways of thinking about about the job. Again, these are things that come in with the more diverse a team you have, the more likely you are to have higher levels of conflict, and those levels of conflict can be good if they're about tasks, about procedures, not so much about personalities, because that personality stuff is largely dysfunctional. Social loafing, I think, is a concept worth filing away. It is found in both Chapter 9 and in Chapter 10. I talk about it, I think, in a quiz video. I think I talk about it in a live session. Social loafing is that when you've got people in groups or teams, there's a bit of an incentive sometimes for people not to work very hard, to sort of ride for free on the backs of the harder working members of the team. Hey, I won't be held accountable for my own individual effort, that as long as the team succeeds, I'm cool. Probably, you experienced some version of this at some point, in school. If you had a geography project that had to be done, and two people in that team worked hard, and the other three sort of hung out, you all got a B plus, that kind of thing. It makes sense if you're all going to get the same grade anyway. Maybe for you not to work that hard, because what is your incentive to try to do it if you're going to get the same grade regardless? So, social loafing occurs in group settings, and the bigger the team is, the more you're going to get that social loafing. The easier it is for people who are disposed to think this way to think they can kind of hide in the weeds a little bit, and they won't be accountable to their teammates for the actions that they take. There's a discussion at 323, 324 about hiring team players, training team players, and then rewarding team players. It really is the end of the discussion for Chapter 10. The first notion with hiring team players is, try not to hire candidates who don't have good team skills. Organizations that have a team-based model will be looking for new hires who embrace the team environment. I've been talking. I talked, I don't know, 10 minutes ago, for those of you who are skipping around, that I'm not a great team player. I would not say that at a job interview. If you feel similarly disposed to me, don't say that. Don't say that. It's a mistake. One of your if you're asked, some version of the "what are your biggest weaknesses" question, what are the areas of your skill set that need the greatest room for improvement? One of those shouldn't be, I'm tough to get along with. I mean, don't do that. I'm tough to get along with. I'm not admitting that in a job interview setting. And if you and I, if we are ever in a position where I am coming to you for a job, look, life is long. These kinds of things happen. I've been teaching for a super long time. It could be that I'll be walking into your office at some point and shaking your hand, and you'll say, "Wait a minute, weren't you the guy on the?" And yeah, that was me. "Oh, thanks. I really enjoyed your." "Oh, good. Hey, didn't you say you were a bad team player?" I'm going to suggest to you that you will have heard me incorrectly. So that is not something to adopt. You do not want to give the impression in any way whatsoever that you are not embracing fully of the team model. It's a mistake, because they're looking to hire people who are mentally and emotionally disposed, with the experience to demonstrate that to be in teams. You can be trained to be better team players. Part of whether it's communication or problem solving or conflict management, right? All the things that are kind of component parts to existing in a team framework. Training can be done in an organization to do that. And as I discussed previously, you need a reward system in order to be a good team player. You need to an incentive structure that encourages both. You're going to be rewarded, evaluated at an individual level, and evaluated in terms of the level of your team success. If your organization is only evaluating you based on your individual traits or metrics, and the overall team health isn't evaluated, then you do you. But if you're also evaluated on some sort of broader performance goal for your team, then you're inclined to make sure that everyone is succeeding. Finally, I guess I said finally a second ago, but here's one more finally. Finally, the very last section of Chapter 10 is a discussion that teams aren't always the answer, that sometimes an organization's better off, utilizing an individual. The simpler a task is, the more likely an organization should be to use an individual and not a team. If you don't need different perspectives, if you don't need diverse input, maybe you want individuals as opposed to teams. Those kinds of things. So that really is it for Chapter 10. Look, in case you haven't heard me say this enough, you're almost certainly going to be okay. That doesn't mean all of you are going to be okay. It's not 100% of the students who pass the course, but it's a lot. It's a lot. If you were sitting here right now betting, am I going to pass this course or not? Yeah, the bet is yes. If you were sitting here betting, am I going to graduate from this institution or not? Yeah, the answer is yes. I in my days as a traditional instructor, one of the courses that I taught kind of at the end of my run was a study skills, brand new student first time in college kind of a thing. And I'd try to shoot as straight as I could. I'd say, look, every one of you has come in here with all of the very best intentions. You're all, you're in your clothes, you're in your shoes, you're at your desk. Here we are on day one, and most of you are going to succeed. And some of you won't. And I don't know who's who. I just know the math. I mean, the math is the math. So if you sit here and you doubt yourself, which is reasonable, it's a lot of material. I'm not sure I'm comfortable taking a multiple choice test. I don't know that I know enough of this stuff. Everyone feels that way. Everyone who's heard this video before you or previous versions of this video, they all had the same thoughts. And I know the math. Most of you pass. And not like 51%. A considerable margin, much closer to everyone than to half. That's fair, right? Much closer to all of you will pass than to only half of you will pass is the true facts of the math of this thing. So you're likely to be okay. Other people have done it before, and they're no more capable than are you. The people who are going to cross the stage at whatever WGU graduation is closest to your physical location, they were all you. They were all brand new, sitting in front of a computer, listening to a video or something like the equivalent thereof, and all wondering, am I going to be okay? And the truth is, most of them are okay, and it works out, for most of them. And there's literally no reason why it won't work out for you. Thanks for your time and attention. Go pass your exam.